Good afternoon. Thank you so much to everyone joining us via Facebook Live and YouTube for the very first episode of season two. Yes, season two. Oh my God, I got chills of Black Writers Read. My name is Nicole M. Young Martin, and I serve as the producer and host for the series. I'm coming to you from my lovely office here in Windsor, Connecticut. You may hear my family in the background throughout, thanks to the outcomes of the pandemic. So, a little bit about what we do before we get started. I am with Valley Society, and this is a program of Valley Society, which is Wichita Dog Writers Guild. Valley Society is a writing and social group for Black writers located in the Pioneer Valley in Western Massachusetts. One of our programs is Black Writers Read, which showcases, celebrates, and honors the words, work, and traditions of Black writers from across the country, across genres, across experiences, and across the African diaspora. Since starting the series last summer in 2020, we've hosted children's book authors, poets, young adult fiction writers, essayists from California, upstate New York, greater Boston, and in our own backyard of Amherst, Massachusetts. I am beyond thrilled, honored, and blessed to welcome to the virtual stage an author who is based in Springfield, Massachusetts, who has been a huge supporter of Black Writers Read from the very beginning. So I am extremely honored to add Aprell May. I'm getting chills. Aprell May to the roster of all of the writers who have read for us. Aprell May is an incredible writer. I had a chance to read her collection of poetry called Exposés, Such a Life, which is available on Amazon. She will be sharing with us essays from her. We will be hopefully helping her get it published. Her memoir, Classic Fly. She writes for The Republican, which is a Western Massachusetts based newspaper. She recently acquired her Master of Fine Arts in Creative Nonfiction Writing from Bay Path University. I'm currently a student there in their doctoral program. And Aprell May has watched probably almost every single episode of Black Writers Read. So it is so lovely to have one of our local writers be here this afternoon. It is also an honor to bring her on during Native American Heritage Month, as she is also a writer who proudly has Native ancestry. So I am going to go ahead and bring her to the virtual stage. Hi, Aprell.
And
Yes, so happy to have you here today.
thanks for having me. I appreciate it. And I'm excited to be here.
Yeah,
It's been a long time coming.
it's such a long time coming.
Mhm.
So, what's going to happen is, for everyone who is joining us, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Aprell. She'll read a couple of selections from her work. I'll bring her back. We'll do a Q&A that'll probably last like 15, 20 minutes. And then we will open it up to everyone joining us today to pose some questions to today's author. So, Aprell, take it away.
Hello, everyone. As Nicole said, I'm a MFA graduate from Bay Path University, and I'm reading from Classic Fly Memoirs from a place of generational healing. So I'm going to read two pieces, A Place I Will Never Forget, and the category is A Living Testimony. A place I will never forget. God placed the greatest things in life on the other side of your biggest fears. Will Smith. Rooted in my memories is the back stairwell of 70 Harrison Avenue, in the heart of downtown Springfield, Massachusetts. The smallest of the twin towers, Park Towers, had 15 floors with emergency stairwells on either side. Never ending yellowish, dimly lit stairs blended into the walls. We used to play hide and go seek in the building, running between floors, flip flopping between the stairwells in the morning, and the cold stairwells reeked of nightly partying. Remnants of ammonia smelling urine combined with smoke from cigarettes, weed, and crack danced long after the party was over. Occasionally, we found a sleeping person in the stairwell. In the back stairwell, we drew our fake gang names, Shady and Gasha, so our parents did not find out. On the walls were purple berry Sharpies. We take our groceries up the back stairs. We leave for overnight trips in the wee hours of the morning. I would stop there in the morning to hike up my knee-length pleated skirt and put on brown lip liner in my tiny hand mirror. In that stairwell, I found out about transgender prostitutes and anal sex all at once. We sang like beautiful house sparrows in the stairwell to hear the echoes. We escaped people's doors who'd we knock on with our dad's long curled handle umbrella playing Ding Dong Ditch. It was in that same stairwell my little sister June said one of our building friends tried to rape her in a game after a game. It was in the back stairwell where we smashed pumpkins on the door and rotated the building from the 15th floor down for Halloween. We hid from winter's cold in the stairwell, looking out the tiny window for the bus in the morning. We'd fight our rivals every summer at the bottom of the stairs. We'd bring our furniture. Our parents saw someone else throw out up the back stairs, so no one didn't see us. No matter how much our parents told us, one man's trash is another man's treasure, we knew if our friends saw us, they'd label us as trash pickers. In the stairwell, we were caught after having a house party. Our parents came home, chased everyone down the steps except for one dumbass that ran up the stairs and sat down, thinking mommy wouldn't catch him. It was also in the back stairwell with no shoes. I ran from an ass whooping because I came home late from the library. Some nights, when I go to sleep, I'm returned to the place where we dwelled as children. I'm running down 15 flights from some unknown dark forest. I jump over 4 steps at a time. I can barely catch my breath. Switching between floors and stairwells, I dive, hoping I'd make it past the bottom platform, and it's still reeking with urine, and out the back door to the safety of the streets. And the category is living testimony. Check your lipstick before you come for me, Naomi Smalls. Time is up. The devil wants his dues. He is tired of the friction and ready to cut off all communications. 2 tears in a bucket, fuck it. He don't even know I was righting his wrongs, making amends, using discernment to finally testify. I was a trophy kid, marking the first child out of wedlock. I tarnished his saintly persona. He wants nothing more than to be done with this story. Transparency these words reveal how life, abuse, and trauma caused by someone who is supposed to love you is a perfect mixture for mental health illness, and that illness that he'd most like him prefer to ignore. In denial, he will forever be inextricably bound by generational curses, only tasting freedom when he seeks forgiveness. Forgiveness from the next 7 generations, because only an acknowledgement is freedom. I want you to not do this. Don't shit on your kids. Don't shit on people. It's the principle grounding in that whole old hip hop adage, don't shit where you sleep. Leave someone like him. Don't be like him. Like Depot says, use that brick to break that chain. Make better choices in life and in love for the kids' sake. They're our future. Facilitate love and growth. Nothing worse than fear and anxiety, suffering the sins of our parents. I hate nightmares every night. I hate the pain of acknowledging that my sister and her children are in a more fucked up life position because of him. I hate that I'm seeking the root cause of his abuse. And even now, I hate that I bite my tongue for peace. Don't he know life's a bitch and then you die? The fact is, I may never know what caused his character to go sour. I may never understand why mommy let it go down, her full history with abuse and abandonment. I can only speculate why our families have been wandering in the wilderness. I can only respect the decisions made then and decide how I will move forward now. I would not wallow in the mud any longer. It is true we lost our way, missed our ancestors' teachings to cultural discontinuity, but who can take the blinders off? Who can tell the ugly truth? I'm finding growth and authenticity, and who can own up to their own selves? Centered and humble, I will. This is my testimony, an introspection of myself, and understanding that in the toughest times there is some omnipresent force that is keeping me alive. For me, healing is acknowledging my roots, caring, kindness, empathy, deciding to seek a path to glory, no matter my past. To be in a place of peace, disrupting who I am deemed to be. celebrating who I am inspired to be, using my talents for that which is good, telling stories that give others hope, a testimony that life can be beautiful after trauma. The devil would like nothing more than to keep these stories in the vault. For job security, perhaps. It would be better for him if we just would act like nothing ever happened, like nothing was ever wrong with him, the situation, or us. Everything is a fragment of imagination, or opinions of oppressed are not valid. Victors want to abuse in peace. Telling these stories will agitate that. By telling these stories, I'm daring to be, to live, to teach, and to mother differently. Recognizing that generational healing is intentional and must be worked on daily. I look up at my girl and see how different her life is. Happier, supported, upwards, all because I dared to stand up and be different. My life is almost like before, just better with healing. Okay, and so those are two pieces that are super important to me. I think like the first one is recognizing where you come from and acknowledging that, and then recognizing where you would want to be. Um, and I think the second one is your testimony, living up to your true self, being authentic in who you are, which means saying your story the way it should be said. Um, and it's hard. Telling the truth is hard, and being honest is hard. But as you're doing it, you're healing these traumas that has been carried down from past generations. Um, you have to tell your truth. You have to be a living testimony. This book is basically for the person who has gone through trauma and is trying to find their journey out. So it's a coming of age story that really sums up how to do this and be a bridge from trauma to healing.
Cool, April. Thank you so much for that amazing reading today. So, we're going to go ahead and transition into the interview portion of today's episode. So, the very first question that I have for April, and all of everyone who's joining us today, please feel free to prepare questions. And if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat of your respective viewing. So, some of you are joining us from Facebook, and some of you are joining us from YouTube. From YouTube. So, the first question I have for April is, I absolutely love the title of your memoir, Classic Fly Essays from Generational Trauma to Healing. Can you talk about the title of your book and how you chose the essays that are included in the book?
So it came to me two part. I thought about my journey and my personal journey, and then my family's journey. Cross generationally, I realized how much of our struggle to exist was there. Um, it played a huge part in our lives, and so much got in the way of us fully living. You know, so these traumas, they were back on a day-to-day basis for every one of us. And when you start to go back and dig into your history from your mother and her mother and then her mother, you realize how many things that we go through, we all struggle with. And it may not be the same experience, but having the troubles that we have are having the same root cause. Then I looked around at my peers and I realized they were going through similar struggles as well. So it made me think about systematic oppression and the classic flight, like the classic plight, and what would that plight look like. Um, the second thing that came to mind, I dreamed of always being somewhere over the rainbow. I don't know how many
Mm.
Wizard of Oz fans are here, but we grew up watching it every single year. And so I always dreamed, I'd be in that place, where troubles melt like lemon drops and they're so far behind you. Um, and as I was thinking about what I would write and how I would write, um, it was the beginning of the pandemic and we were locked down. And the memory came to me. It's like one of my oldest memories of school. The memory came to me because I took my daughter downtown after a dentist appointment and it was deserted because, of course, it was the pandemic. And I was like, this used to be this used to be that. And we're just,
Mm.
I'm running around and we're in the Howard Street area. And then we get to the area where there is a huge, it's right on Chestnut Street and and Main Street.
Oh.
And it's a huge Wizard of Oz mural. And we get there, and I start thinking about how I hated to be the munchkin, but I loved the place so much. And
Mm.
from that experience, just thinking about that bridge, the rainbow as being a bridge from one place to another, and a journey, you know. And then another moment during the pandemic, I was sitting in my backyard, and there was a bunch of bluebirds just playing and chatting around. And I'm just thinking,
Nice.
like, this is like somewhere over the rainbow where I could be that bridge from my mother's trauma and her mother's trauma to the healing in my daughter's generation. So that was like the real like tie into that. I thought about the being a bridge, the past and present, life and my childhood traumas, and reframing what I was taught from my parents, from their relationships with people, finances, and understandings. And then, I just brought that all together and decided this is
Mm.
like classic plight. This is what it would mean to live in this kind of area and this kind of environment and go through some of the same traumas that a lot of us share. And so, how do you be a bridge? What does that look like? You know, and where do we start asking questions, and when do we start reframing ourselves? So
Mm.
that's what some of the stories are in here. It's that when you go through the dark, you find the light. And so most of the stories are from, past situations that brought me to this moment where I'm thinking my daughter has healed from all the pain that we've gone through before.
Nice. I love that. And I love that it acknowledges so many maternal lineages too. I love that. One of the genres you write in is urban creative nonfiction. Can you share some insight on the genre for those who may be joining us that are unfamiliar with the form?
So yeah, you got to watch me sometimes because I'll make something up. Because and let's just say that let's just say I coined that term, and if I had to describe it, it would be telling the stories that urban girls or urban boys go through. And in a creative way because our stories matter. It would be having that authentic language, that authentic voice. It would be like, um, I'm talking to you like we're in it's the slang, it's the environment, it's
Mhm.
the things that you deal with. And when I say traumas, it could be anything from having a bad experience in a school play to going to the bank and being discriminated against. So it's
Mm.
that feel of these real stories that happen to everyday people who's living in this environment. Um, and so, yes, I made that up, and I think that um, it made me focus on my voice a lot and how I was presenting these stories. Even in the love stories, it's how I'm presenting these stories and making it, classic nonfiction, but with an urban feel.
Mhm. And also what I love about it too, I love the vernacular. It speaks to me very much like Zero Neale Hurston's work, especially Their Eyes Were Watching God, where you will hear like I would hear voices of people that I grew up with. I'm originally from Detroit. And so it was very, like comforting and it felt like home to hear familiarity in the work. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I hope other people explore the genre, because it's definitely, and what I love about it too, and why it was so important for us to talk about it with Black Writers Read, is one of the things that I really want Black Writers Read to do is to really mess with the canon, and that there's more to the canon than just the, like, the Iliad and, like, like Hamlet and all this other stuff, like all these things by right writers. I'm like, no, there are many voices from different hues of life that are not only contributing to the canon, they're building the canon. And I talk a lot about this in the writing classes that I teach. Like, I fight so hard. They're like, you have to teach major works. And I'm like, okay, tell me what that is. And they're like, oh, Frankenstein and I'm like, whoa, hold up. There are writers that look like me who have
Yeah.
done and made some really huge contributions. And so I am all about, I'm like, nope, I am not teaching. Nope. I'm
Right.
sorry.
So I read this really compelling article, and it was talking about should writers, that was the title of it, should writers use their own language? And in
Mm,
that, I thought about who inspired me, and how do I talk to my sister or my brother, and that's how I want to speak to my audience, right? Like, I want to
nice.
use my own language, because then they understand me. There's something different conveyed behind the language, and behind the experiences that I think that we have to capture, and each experience is different. But like I said, we're having the root cause of some traumas being passed down, and how do we get to that, and how do we heal from that? And I think language kind of helps us do that. It kind of pushes us forward, and so if people can understand you, then people can see where you're going and where your point is.
Nice. And so, those who are joining us, I'm going to skip around a little bit because I provide our guest questions beforehand. So, I'm skipping around a little bit. Creative nonfiction allows us to situate a very unique protagonist, one that we sometimes are most familiar with, sometimes who is often ourselves. So, thinking about the breadth of your work, which is poetry, memoir, creative nonfiction, who tends to be your protagonist when you write? And especially if it is you, what do you owe her? And if it is not you, what do you owe that particular character?
Well, I think for myself, the paradigm changes. So the protagonist is not always going to be the same protagonist in each of the pieces that I have, in each of my
Mhm.
poems. So it just changes. Sometimes it's my abusive father. Other times it's children and bullies that I grew up with. Other times I'm the bully.
Mhm.
Sometimes it could be a teacher. Sometimes a store clerk, and systematic oppression. All of that can be a protagonist. Um, but my goal is really to neutralize that. How do
Mm.
how do we get past that? How do we heal from that kind of space, and that kind of eh, we go through these changes, and how do we heal from each one of these moments? So it's really about how people change, and how things change, and how we get the light with the dark.
Nice. So you've written poetry as well, which your book Expose Such a Life is available on Amazon, and I had a chance to read it. And one of my favorite poems is Cinderella. Which would you
Thank
say
you.
of the yes? Which would you say of the two genres, poetry and urban creative nonfiction, is the means to best convey your mission as a writer? And then, do you have different intended audiences for each? And if so, how do you decide which for which?
So the poetry is what led me into the creative nonfiction. The poetry is like revealing in many ways, especially around emotion, and I use that to not only connect to those personal stories, um, but the vulnerability of those stories, because
Mm,
telling hard stories and telling stories of healing you have to be vulnerable in those kind of stories, because those are the hardest moments of what you're going through, and then you have to see it for what it truly is in order for you to get to this place of healing. So actually, both of the stories come from a place. They're for any audience. It's for the people who are in this kind of lifestyle and who want to explore that kind of generational trauma and healing read. So it's not really about different audiences, because
Mm.
sometimes my poetry will inspire my writing. Sometimes my writing will inspire my poetry. Sometimes my painting will inspire my writing. So it just pretty much go like
Mm.
it's how it flows to me. Um, I think art is in many forms, and so I as an artist, you do more than one.
Mhm.
So
Yep. Cool. So, what are some possibilities and limitations? We're going back to urban creative nonfiction. What are some possibilities and limitations of urban creative nonfiction? And what have you learned about yourself while exploring the genre?
so for the last question, I've learned so much about my voice and my experiences, because where okay, let's one situation is where many of my peers were writing from growing up in a two-family house. I wrote about growing up in an
Mm.
apartment building, and how we had,
Mm.
it was just a different kind of life in an apartment building with, let's say, 80 kids living in the building with you than, just having a
Oh.
few neighbors across the street. Um, so, and when I mean living in the building, just different apartments, and we're all friends and things like that. So it's, and then we go to the pool, and so it's a different kind of life that you have, and it's so I realized what my voice is, what my story was, how authentic
Mhm.
was my story to me, and how was I going to tell that story? So the possibilities lie in authenticity. I think that that's what comes out of this kind of genre. I think that telling these urban stories are important because it can uplift the readers who identify with growing up in a building, perhaps, with a bunch of kids
Mhm.
around and having so many personalities. Um, and hopefully it inspires somebody to want to act as a bridge themselves, like, how can I
Mhm.
take what I've read here and really put it into action, because that's what I really want to do. I want to really want to inspire people to look at the hard situations and learn, understand where it could bring you, and what a place of healing if you just neutralize that. So the narrative is around growing up and surviving, but not only just
Mhm.
surviving, but making a way. And making the way is the important part. I don't think there's any limits when you're telling stories with authenticity. I don't think that you can limit yourself, because we all have a million stories we could tell every day because we have different experiences. Um, and a funny story actually is, as my daughter grew as a reader, um, she desperately was seeking stories from people like herself. And I said, whoa. We had
Oh.
brought her to Barnes and Noble, and I'm like, well, I think I created a monster, because she's like, I don't see any urban stories. And I'm just like, you can't judge a book by its cover. You gotta read, everything. But it made me realize that there's importance in telling our stories. There's
Mm.
importance because little girls who look like us, little kids who look like us and have the same skin as us, will want to read what we have to say, and they want to learn, and they want to grow, and they want to experience, and they want to envision themselves sometimes in different places and different spaces. So um, that's really the possibilities. And so if you
Mm,
had, if you can inspire one kid to, or one person reading your book to want to have generational healing and to want to have get to a place where things are, where you're over the rainbow, then you know, that's worth it.
nice. And then also, I absolutely, absolutely love that you are a local journalist. You write for the Republican. And when I heard you got that job, I was like, oh, there's someone that I know that writes for the Republican. The landscape is changing. So I
Yay.
heard, yeah, and I heard that it's your dream job. So, how have you been able to take what is important to you as a creative writer and incorporate it into your work as a reporter for one of our big newspapers in the area?
So, what it really is for me is the act of telling stories. I love to tell people's story and I love to have that human connection and I love to make a social impact. So, like, it's really the act of telling stories for me. It's just something that comes
Mm,
natural. Um, explaining, explaining to people, explaining to the local public through storytelling what's going on, what happened, and the I like to do good stories. So I've been
mhm,
posting a lot of events that are going on in the local native and BIPOC community, in the arts community, because we have to support local artists and local
yeah,
writers. That's super important. And so I'm getting our stories out there. So that's what's important to me. It's really the basic act of storytelling and storytelling in a good kind of way. Um, of course, like I said, we all will have that trauma that follows. Sometimes there's bad stories. Sometimes there's things that, we're not proud of our community for it happening. But if we basically look for the healing and the good part of
mm,
each story, I think that's what I have taken into it. It's just like, you know, yeah, we're coming up on Thanksgiving and it's a day of mourning, but it's also Native American Heritage Month, and look at what these local natives, these contemporary natives are doing. Like, yeah, Juneteenth is coming up. Guess what you guys should
yeah,
be doing? Art for the Soul is a wonderful, wonderful gallery, and it's focused on BIPOC art. And
mhm,
I want to highlight every one of those amazing events. So I think that it's that act of finding these stories and being able to let people know and sharing these
nice.
experiences.
And speaking of, you mentioned on your website that you are a seventh generation storyteller. How have you been able to maintain this tradition in your lineage, and why is it important to you to continue this tradition?
Um, so it kind of it's just natural for us. My family, I used to always sneak around and try to listen to my dad and my grandma's, grown up conversations, and they were telling stories around the table having tea, and I wasn't supposed to listen. Or I'd be listening to my aunts while they're cooking in the kitchen for Thanksgiving. So storytelling came naturally for us. It always happens, it still happens. And so me doing this as a professional just came
Mm,
natural. And I was already a creative because, I was writing when I was a kid, and then I kind of fell off of that and I started styling hair, and you have to be creative for that.
mm,
So I was still in this creative mode. And so when I decided to go back to school and re-educate myself, why not do what I love? Why not tell stories? Like, um, so that's what I really, that's where I got the storytelling from. And it's an honor and it's a pleasure to tell stories. I think about my grandfather. He doesn't really talk much, but he
mm,
just really recently started talking more. And so once he started seeing that I was doing stories on his Native American heritage and the things that were going on, like with the Indian Adoption Project and how he
Mhm.
was wrapped up in that. He was like, tell my story, you know, you got to tell it, you got to tell it, you know. So I realized how important it is for me to be in this place that I'm in. Um, if I don't tell their stories, you know, my then their stories fall with me, you know, and then
Mm.
my daughter doesn't have those. So 7 generations, you always want to do things to make it better for the next 7 generations, and that's the Iroquois principle. And it's really about sustainability. And when you think about sustainability in your family history, in your family name, in your family period, you want to be able to tell those stories that sustain your family, and you want to be able to tell the right stories, and you want to be able to use the right language, and I think that that's so important in storytelling is having the stories that matter and that mean something to your tribe, you know, to your family, and to get you guys through that hump in life. So it's really important, and I feel like I'm so glad to be doing it.
Nice. Who in your family inspired and uplifted you to become a writer, and what have they taught you that you wish to share with forthcoming generations?
So it really wasn't someone in my family. It was a teacher, actually.
Mm.
You know, and I wasn't expecting it at all. Um, we were all in the hair business, but when I was a kid, I had to write a piece about slavery, and
Mm.
I was just like, you know, writing the story, and I'm telling my sister, and she's like, make sure you don't sugarcoat it, you know. So I
Mm.
wrote this whole story, and I was just angry about it, you know, and I handed it in, and I didn't think anything else. Um, and one day when I walked in, I think it was ninth, it must have been 10th grade. I walked in, and it was
Mm.
at the end of the school, and I sat down, and everybody started clapping for me, and I'm like, what? You know, like you know, I was always the quiet one. What did it? I get in trouble, and you know what? And so the teacher, Dr. Jennings, stood up and was like, "You got the essay of the year. I think your essay on slavery was amazing, and
Wow.
you're very talented, and I think that you should continue." And I was in awe. I was flabbergasted because I didn't think that I had, especially growing up in a household with domestic violence, I didn't think that I had
Mm.
any talent. I didn't think that I had anything worth anything to say. And winning that award made me realize no, my stories matter and they're important. And I can say what I want to say. It's a blank canvas, and I can just be as authentic as I want to be when I write. Um, and so it's really just like sharing, you know, that personal inside, that vulnerability that I was talking about earlier, um, that made me realize that I was, you know, a writer. So it was that vulnerability, that being angry about slavery, that wanting something to change, that not sugarcoating it made me want to tell stories.
Nice. As a writer with Black and Native heritage and one who proudly embraces these intersecting identities, what does it mean to be chosen for Black Writers Read?
It really means I'm really ecstatic about it because it really means that I can embody every part of my social location. I'm Native, I'm Black, and that's something I struggled with for all of my life. Even now, I still struggle with it. I walk into the room, you tell people you're Native and Black, and people are like, no, no, mm-mm, don't say that. And you're like, what? You know, so it's about, like you were saying earlier, my matriarchal lineage. it's about coming from every space in my social location, and that was like the one conflicting one that I had most of my life.
Mm,
Not being black enough, not being native enough. So it's really recognizing that as I could be both, and I could tell both of these stories. I can tell all of these stories of who I am. Where people are multifaceted and they're dimensional, and so that's what it really means to me, is that but we as BIPOC, we can tell many stories about many different layers about our experiences, who we are, and our voices.
nice. And then the last question I have for you, April, before seeing what our audience has is, what are some ways that we can support you in your work? And do you have any projects forthcoming that folks should be on the lookout for?
Yes, so I am finishing up this memoir, of course. So pay attention to my social media sites because I will be announcing a release date. And also, I'm going to be announcing my exhibit opening. We are still here in the Springfield City Libraries and Museums, and that's basically a contemporary Native American exhibit to show that we're still here, we're living in modern day society, we are not extinct, and we do not live in TVs. Um, so, and we look like
Yes.
everybody else. um, so that exhibit is going to be amazing. We're telling many stories about the journey of just being contemporary, modern Native people, um, and we're just going to that. So please, please, please look out for that. Um, yeah, and I think I'm going to be after that. I think I'm going to be working on another book. I'm not sure what the title is going to be called yet, but it's going to be on um, motherhood and infant mortality,
Mm,
and it's going to talk about the journey of healing, and wrestling with your body.
perfect. And I love that you're writing a book on motherhood because I've followed you on social media for some time. And for those who follow April on Facebook and Instagram, you will see she is a very proud mother. And it's just so beautiful to see you cherish that part of your identity.
Yeah, yeah. My girl is like everything for me. Um, she's 18 now, and just trying to get them to adulthood and trying to nurture them into life in a way that is responsible, that is honoring that life that you have. Because let's face it, everyone can't have children. Everyone doesn't want children, and then when you have children, it's this other kind of relationship that you would never know you have. So it's that connection that I have with her. So yeah, I cherish her. I don't want her to leave yet.
Oh, I don't know
But
if she's
she's
watching, but
she's working. Yeah.
oh, yeah. So I'm just taking a quick look. Audience members, this is your chance to chime in. If you have any questions, please feel free. Excuse me, getting over a sinus infection. Put them in the either Facebook comments or the YouTube comments because we do have our author available for a couple more moments. Just wanted to
Yes.
see if anyone had anything coming up. What are the dates for the exhibit and where is it going to be at again, April?
So we're still working on the video part of the exhibit. So you'll be able to go in and listen. So it'll be that the dates are up for announcement because we're working with the videographer to get some more interviews done. So we don't have a specific
Cool.
date, but I'm hoping for the spring, like first quarter of next year. So the
Nice.
beginning, yeah. Um, and it's entitled "We Are Still Here," and it's going to be at the Springfield City Library and Museums.
Nice.
So we have
Cool.
some art, we have some photography that is just amazing, and then we have a video portion of it.
Oh, that's going to be amazing. And for those who follow
Mhm.
me, I'm at NicoleMYoung.com. And once that information is available, you'll be able to find it on all my information because I love celebrating and putting up information about Black writers who have read for us. So, April, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. It was such a pleasure having you. I'm going to close out this afternoon with a couple of final words on Black Writers Read. And I am so looking forward to reading Classic Fly when it's finally published.
Yay! I hope everyone reads it.
Yes.
I hope you're inspired by it. I hope that you can see the message within.
Yes. Ah, so I do have a question. Thank you so much, Allison. She says, April, I'm curious of how the process of writing memoir and poetry differs for you.
It does. It does. So poetry, like I said, is much more emotional. So I'm kind of just going off the feelings that I have. I like to sometimes music. I like to sometimes write from a picture. So I'll be writing that poetry down fast. With writing a memoir, um, I really take my time more. I slow down a little bit more, and I really try to process the scene. I try to do a little bit more technical things like make sure my transitions are there and all that stuff. So it's just really more of a process of the format for me, um, and then really expanding my stories a lot more for memoir than in poetry. In poetry, I kind of leave the audience to read into the words a little bit more. With my memoir, I kind of allow the reader in a little bit more deeply and a little bit more intensely.
Nice. That was such a great question. Want to see if there's any more other questions before we wrap up for this afternoon. And I am so happy that we had people joining us today from Facebook and also from YouTube.
Thank you,
Let's see.
everyone.
Yes. Perfect. And that was such a great question, Allison. Thank you so much. So, April, thank you so much for joining us today. And I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the afternoon.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you. So, for people who are interested in continuing to support us on our journey, there are multiple ways you can support Black Writers Read. You can do so by subscribing to us via Patreon. Patreon is a monthly financial obligation. We do pay an honoraria to all of the writers who read for us. And then also, of course, we have some back end cost. Please feel free to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Facebook, we're at Valley Society 413. Also at Instagram, we're at Valley Society 413. And also to follow me as well. I am just NicoleMYoung.com and I post updates on Black Writers Read and all of the other things that I have going on as well. I'm a content producer. I produce and host the show. I'm also a poet and playwright, and I am also a local writer based in New England. So, coming up next month, I am so excited to announce we have Margot Gabriel, who will be joining us from Lisbon, Portugal. For those who joined us for Black History Month this past February, she was one of our readers that was featured there, and she'll be reading an excerpt from the Expat Kitchen, which is a cookbook that was just released earlier this fall. She'll be joining us on December 4th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. 1 p.m. Eastern Time. So thank you all so very much for joining us today, and we hope to see you next month in December.